Let's chat about how you define AI, because I know you're passionate about it in your organization across both a network and a customer experience type of environment to get to where you've got to get to. And any experiences that you've had about how you deliver that more broadly for TELUS, I think would be really interesting.
Wow, where do I start there?
Let's start at the beginning.
You opened it very, very wide.
No, just take a minute.
Yeah. I'll step back first and say, I think everybody jumps in as to AI, and AI is a silver bullet. And instead you have to think about what outcomes do you want to get, and AI becomes a means to the end. And so what we've always looked at it is anything we do around AI has to drive some kind of business outcome. And we kind of ground it in that. And so we look at everything saying, okay, what do I want to do on customer experience, for example? And where are the opportunities there that I can enhance the customer experience? And then I look at, say, okay, what tools do I have? And then that's where AI comes to play. And then when you look at even AI, I mean, we've been doing AI, all of us have been doing AI for about 15 years, because let's not forget there's the legacy and traditional, predictive AI and predictive kind of machine learning. And now you've got the generative. But these all become tools of where you apply it. And there's still a big role for the predictive world to play in, especially when we look at networks and what networks, autonomous networks do. And so that's the first thing. As we ground it as saying, okay, it's not about AI, but it's about what am I trying to deliver as an outcome or a solution. And then you're talking how do I enable it, or what's our philosophy around it? And I think some of our peers in the keynotes, they kind of touched on this. The key here is to democratize it. If you really want to become AI first, how do you have every single employee in your company thinking with an AI first mindset, which is then saying, coming from first principles, saying, what data do I have? What problem do I want to solve? And then how can I use AI as a tool to do it? And in order to do that, Mike just fell down again.
Oh, okay. I will leave you. Go ahead.
And so then in order to do that, you have to actually then empower every single employee to have it at their fingertips. And so that's been a lot of the investment we've done, and I think we're going to talk as a panel, is one, how do you make the data readily accessible across the board in a safe and secure way, but also comprehensive? But then how do you actually put the AI tools themselves? And so we built a lot of harnesses and saying, okay, every employee can have the latest LLMs, can have the latest machine learning models at their fingertips, and can go play and do a thing and do it in a way that you can do no harm. I think a lot of people are worried about, okay, but if I do it and it's not a safe way, can I damage the company or can I exfiltrate data? But if you create this environment where it's safe and no employee can do any harm, then everybody goes and plays. And then the magic happens there, I think, from the crowdsourcing and people using it.
I thought that was a very provocative set that Andrea talked about getting rid of whole departments. I think we probably all would like to do some of that in order to make things better, but I think it's a difficult thing to do sometimes, particularly in traditional organizations that in some cases are 100 years old.
Yeah, very.
And I think, let's talk, Thomas, about Deutsche Telekom's experience and where you're up to. You're actually in charge of one of the authors of the data strategy for the whole of Deutsche Telekom.
Yeah.
So I suppose this goes right to the core of what Hisham was saying to you about defining what role AI plays in your data.
Yeah, Hisham, it looks like you have been ghostwriting some of the stuff that I have to go off topic just for a second.
Sure.
You just promoted me to be CTO.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm taking care of the architecture in the network.
Okay.
And so if you
well,
apply, maybe there's
promotion.
an opportunity. Okay, now, but back to topic. I don't want to repeat, Hisham, what you already said, but just complement some things in there. I think what we really require to build on top of that and then unlock also the capability to work with agents and give them a level of autonomy is have a baked-in audit trail compliance as code that allows you to steer which entity can access what data for which purpose. And if you get that properly right, and there are industries where this has been sort of like health and some others, where you really have that as an auditable trail, then we can also make sure that we act in a secure way and then unlock the opportunities to deal with data in a more broader way across the domains. Yeah, because I would love to use it beyond specific use cases where we put it together right now already, like for example, if you combine network experience of an individual customer with the customer lifetime value and then see what we can do with churn prediction and stuff like that. I mean, those are the things that we're doing. But really having that in place so that we can play broader across the data domains is a huge unlock for value.
Yeah. And is it informing your strategy significantly? Does it gate your strategy, or is it just something you have to take into account in being able to define and organize a strategy in that way?
No, it's one of the 5 crucial pillars that we have. So that's one. The centerpiece is for us data product thinking, to re-democratize the data and make it a service to the rest of the organization. If you're producing data in your area of expertise, you have to make it available for everybody. So that's the second one. Then having a platform in place that can properly work. Then come up with the right operating model across the different entities in the organization so that rules of engagement across are clear so that you can really proliferate the data. So all these angles are required for the data strategy.
And Suleiman, I guess because you're the chief architect for a bunch of the stuff that goes on in VMO2 in the UK, your focus is more on the network rather than that kind of holistic domain bringing together that I know Hisham will talk a lot about later. Understanding that, do you find AI is having a big impact in the way that you're going about in your business and doing your business? And how is that translating over into the customer service elements when you have to deliver it into them? Do you have some defined pathways that you have to link about?
Just to clarify, I'm the technology strategy and architecture, not the chief architect. In terms of AI and now as you mentioned, the different data sources. I mean, there is now the time where you're actually getting data from so many different domains. You got the network data, you got the crowdsourced data, you got the data from the customer side, the billing teams, and then you've got the data of customer interaction. Now, all of that is coming, and sometimes it's just a matter of adding the right context to give value to the data. So, so like the example of today, if you would look at the data of the sites which are covering underground, it would be much different from yesterday and from last week. And if you don't have the context, then your AI system will tell you all the nice stories of why it happened. But if you told it was a strike, right, that adds a meaning to it, and it can actually interpret, okay, what to do. And if you did it like, let's say yesterday, that is the strike today, it can already optimize the network to make it more suitable for today's traffic. People are going to use more bus. They'll be using the apps of TfL more. So just by adding the right context to the data, you have increased so much the value of that same data. So that's how actually, I think, before you go into more details of EDA and doing box plots, your very basic things actually is enhancing how the value is coming from the AI. And then, of course, for each of the different use cases, it's not always the same data or not the same value in the same data. Some will need more precise information. Others are maybe good with a less precise information. So it's either not, it's not one size that fits all use cases. It will vary from case to case, and then likewise, each of the domains will have their own need to a different level of how they're using the systems.
And in what you're doing for VMO2, how have you architected the inference of that, for example, in that, literally the inference of it, is the AI helping you to do that? Or do you have to manually instruct the system that there is a strike today and there will be different patterns? Or is it learning that itself through drawing in those data points? Are we at that point yet for you?
So actually, we want the system to be able to do this autonomously, right? To be able to learn, able to see what's happening, rather than me telling what's going to be happening next week. It should be able to look around and tell me what's going to happen, right? So if I would be, logging in the morning, say, okay, what happened today or yesterday? And then what are you going to plan for next week? So you should be able to tell me, and that's our ideal way to already tell me, I'm going to do this next week and this the week after, because there's going to be for example, we're having this FutureNet here. Tell me, I'm going to optimize the Intercontinental because they're going to be FutureNet, so more people are using LinkedIn and their emails. Whereas on the O2, there is a concert of YouTube, and people are going to more Snapchat and more Insta. So rather than me, telling it can tell me, okay, I'll plan my network for this because of this, and for that because of that. So it's, that's the ultimate autonomous network that we are after.
Yeah. And Carl, from Wavelo, sorry, Carl Mitchell, I should say, because you're photographer, you're not Bob. No, I'm not Bob. Bob couldn't get here. Kyle, a little bit, Wavelo kind of overarched the whole of this, I guess, in understanding how that delivers that set of solutions to bring those domains together. With ontology and schemas are big parts of how you produce what you do. Perhaps talk a little bit about, at the top level, how that works for you in delivering it as a supplier into these environments.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, Wavelo, we operate at the orchestration and integration layer primarily. So the most simple way to think of it is a common telecom workflow, right? Placing an order, right? You're going to hit 5, 6 different systems. They're all going to have to do things in different ways. Pulling data, possibly waiting for one system. Maybe there's an error, right? How does that operate? And so that using AI, for example, one of the things that we think about when we frame our problems is, let's say a port-in fails, right? So you can use AI, for example, to have a dedicated agent that's designed specifically to resolve that port-in. It's learned from decades of experience. Maybe it's a jurisdictional thing. It knows, oh, port-ins typically fail here, or you haven't paired things together. So you can use AI at sort of different levels of this orchestration.
And in understanding that for Wavelo get involved in that orchestration level. Are you producing the kind of information and intelligence in that network, not the information, but the intelligence in the network that then delivers that information with reliability and resilience in there that allows the networks to do what they're trying to do across those domains? Is that what we're trying to do?
Yeah, it's essentially we integrate, right? So one of the products that we have, one I own, called Wavelo Connect, is specifically designed to ingest signals and intent, for example, from downstream network. Now, let's say you want to orchestrate a workflow where you've got multiple events happening. Historically, that's just data that's sort of fire hose fed to an AI model. And we hope the AI model can figure that out and then potentially act, especially in the agentic AI. It's not so much a data accuracy issue as it was in the past. It's actually a data safety issue, because instead of just presenting perhaps a wrong answer to a CSR agent who has the domain knowledge to say, I think the AI chatbot's wrong here, I'm going to do the right thing, you're now asking them to autonomously act, right? And so, I provisioned to the wrong network. I did something that's a problem. And at scale, that's even worse, right? So that's sort of the way that we're approaching that problem.
And Hisham, I know you're thinking a lot at TELUS about how to get those various bits of information and those big data streams, hoses, if you like, right. Are you having to re-engineer kind of your data catalogs and your semantic layers to be able to be consistent across those areas, particularly machine to machine? Are you having to do that? Is that actively something you're having to think very hard about across the business to be able to deliver the kind of outcomes you're trying to deliver? Whether that's in billing or whether that's in network or whether that's in customer service or whatever it might be. How much are you putting into that?
That's all their effort going in.
Okay.
Right? And so it's a great conversation, because a lot of people are talking about the data platform. And you hear it talked about today and many of my peers. And I think the definition, a lot of people say data platform is your data lake. And everybody's worried about just how do I put all the data in a single place? How do I have the ingestion? How do I do it real time? And that's not really, that's the second order part of the platform. The real platform is having a data catalog. The real platform is actually understanding what is the total addressable market of all the data you have. Right. And do you have the right coverage and the right visibility? And then more importantly then, what does that data mean? So how are you going on into different domains and saying, okay, this is what the data represents. This is the context behind it. This is how it can be used. This is the accuracy of it. I am the source of truth, as opposed to being a replica or a copy. Those are very important, because the AI or the knowledge comes out of understanding that context. And so you really have to invest in that metadata or the catalog or that data cataloging. And that's more important than having the data lake. And in fact, even in this agentic world, there's even a question saying, do I need to have all the data in a lake? Because in a world of APIs and MCPs, maybe now you can get the data ad hoc through an API. And so for us, the data platform, there is a bit of a data lake, but that becomes very selective what we ingest in there. But it's more about the data catalog and just saying, okay, can there be a single catalog that both humans and agents can look up and understand, if I'm trying to look for this data, where can I find it? And where do I have the correlation? Which gets the other part too, is you have all these domains, but you need now a unique identifier that can stitch it together. And maybe I'll just close off by an example on something we've done at TELUS. But think of this example. You might have your fixed network, and you have an engineering team, and they had some routage edge, card that failed. They quickly detected it, remediated, got it solved in 30 minutes, and everybody's happy. And they're like patting themselves on the back, and that was great. And then you can have the RAN network and the RAN engineers, and we had congestion on a corridor, and it caused some drop calls. Again, detected it, resolved it within 10 minutes, And everybody think we're doing a bang-up job. But what happened if it was poor Soulman, that it was his house that was actually impacted by that routed edge, and he was all frustrated and didn't have internet and he couldn't work from home, and then he got up and got in his car and drove down the highway, and it happened to be the same highway that had the congestion. In that isolation now, Soulman is going to be a super frustrated customer.
Yes.
And we're, as a business, completely blind to that, that's saying these two independent incidents that we thought were resolved very well, but it actually impacted Soulman really badly. And we now, his impression of TELUS is kind of bottomed out. And that's very important insights. And then how do we kind of understand that and predict? And so then we need to have that data model. We need to stitch to say that routed edge and everything is tied to these accounts that happen to be Soulman's account, but the same thing on the RAN. And so it's very important now to stitch all that data together and have the context of what it means and what it means in terms of a customer impact, but also be able to correlate it to a particular customer.
And in Deutsche Telekom, Thomas, across the board, the thing about AI, I find, is it still hallucinates, we know that, and we have to be careful about that.
Yeah.
But it's so confident in its hallucinations that it can mislead you. If that's in a machine-to-machine context in an agentic environment, how are you able to do that without obviously putting endless trials in until you get to, you can't fail fast running at the kind of scale and that you're running at, which is a critical, mission-critical type of environment. How do you resolve that and still continue to move at the velocity that's required of you in your strategy and in your operations to be able to do that by putting those things in place? And I guess some of that's about audit and security as well of the information.
I mean, we are on a learning curve also at DT as far as this is concerned. But there are a couple of components that you definitely require. So first of all, you have to really partition both the data that you have and also the access to take action on the network on behalf of a customer to very specific purposes. And then design your applications that run on top of that. And even if those are multi-agentic systems in a way that they have a very clear, defined task, very narrow, you put in safety mechanisms like, for example, and then having other agents that control that kind of outcome that comes from that. But I think the most crucial part to really make sure that you're not doing something that you don't want to do is you limit the scope in which certain applications that you build can take action. So I think that's the crucial part in order to move forward, basically as you do with human beings. Yeah, so there are quite some similarities as far as this is concerned.
And Solomon, for VMO too, sorry Hisham, I'll come back to you in a second, but Solomon, in the way you're deploying it at the moment, deploying AI, I think we all get a bit giddy about AI, to be honest with you. I think we all need to calm down, but it still has a very valuable place in how we're going to run our networks more efficiently, with more agility, being able to respond quicker and respond better to our clients to hopefully delight them. What are the things that are most important to you in the data that you receive in? Is it the network quality? Is it the open source or the crowdsource? It's not open source, crowdsource information that you get. What is it that gives you the biggest agility multiplier in your business with AI, do you think?
So it's basically, in the end, comes down to the customer. So what is it that brings the best customer value for us? And also, what are the, as of today, the low-hanging fruits? These are, of course, the autonomous, fully autonomous future. But if you look at today, I mean, there are activities which we think can be done by AI pretty soon. I mean, look at the typical example of network optimization. If you take the city of Manchester, we've got thousands of sites, and if you want to manually optimize it, I mean, we are all of them in our initial work have done actually practical walk tests. My first job was walking test on the south of France, Nice port. Very nice work, by the way.
Very nice.
So, but we cannot do the same work now in Manchester. It will be too much. So then we had, for a few decades now, the tools which are running on rule-based system, which can then optimize the network. But then there's a limit to what you can allow that tool to do. Because if it is changing too many parameters, then after 6 months, you have a network which has got too many changes, and you're not able to troubleshoot what caused what problem. And therein where, when AI comes in, it's able to look at the data and have the right context. So it can have the KPIs, counters from the network. It can have the crowdsourced data. It can have the billing information. It can have the customer data coming from the customer team. And then you put it all together, and then it becomes the powerful entity which can actually tune and optimize the network for the best outcome. And when that is running in a closed loop, then you have a system which is optimized and is constantly getting better. So that's something which is more, let's say, doable in the near future in a more autonomous way and brings you a value. And as time goes on, you'll have them more use cases. But the key for that is, okay, your data is reliable. And instead of having data half an hour, if you even have data every 3 hours, the key is that it should be reliable.
Right.
So if you have the reliable data, then and you have the right metadata, you're actually able to do things which are going to be making us more efficient and bringing more value to the end customer.
Okay. Sorry, Hisham, did you want to say something beforehand, or is that something?
Yeah, I was going to top up on Thomas's answer. So fully agree with Thomas, what you said, and especially limiting the scope, of actions the agent can do. But I want to say something provocative here, which is this whole, not to you, but the question, like this whole narrative of the agents can hallucinate and everything, like it makes this assumption that humans don't make mistakes. And if you think about it, like humans make lots of mistakes. And if in a world where it was humans doing it, and in fact, in its internal crisis, usually when a human under pressure is probably going to make more mistakes. And so if we think about it that way, and what have we done, how we solved it humans, and when humans do it, we always said you want to have two hands on the wheel for every change you do and have someone review it. Or to your point, like have a good audit trail or have a quick rollback for any change you do. Those can all be done at the agentic side too, right? And so a lot of those same controls happen there. And so if you just apply those same principles, which says, okay, you can have multitude of experts when you have agents do it. You can have agents review agents, and look at it change. And then to your point, now that you have this vast data with all the metadata, you can almost pro forma predict, if I'm going to make this change, I have some context and maybe a digital twin play out what are the possible scenarios of where it could go. It becomes so much vastly more reliable. And so I think this narrative of like it's dangerous to agents it's the other way around. It's actually a lot safer.
Yes.
And in fact, with agents, I get to know every single action that was taken, where sometimes with humans, you don't have that visibility, right? And you don't know every decision that was made. So
let's not forget what we need to pull that one off, because you then need to be very consequent on registering your agents, have a monitoring in place so that you have that visibility. I mean, that's what you have to be adamant on, and then you can build on top.
I think governance and auditing of these is going to be absolutely key. At the pace we're moving, it seems to me that that's a very important. We'll come on to that in a second.
Observability.
Listen,
again. It's like from all the layers now.
I was really smiling at Colin earlier when he said, I don't really like regulation very much, but at the moment I think we probably need a bit more than we've got. And I thought that was absolutely spot on. Very interesting that BT would say that. It's probably one of the most regulated operators in the world. But I think that's absolutely spot on where we are with AI at the moment. So I think in Wavelo, you see this kind of holistically as well, I think, from what we've seen, Carl, at least. And do you see actual real add value processes around your customer base in being able to take this information and not just be more efficient, but to add value to the spreadsheet, as it were? Do you see much of that happening?
Yeah, and I think one of the fundamental things we think about is it's not just about doing stuff faster. It's a fundamentally different way of operating. And so the example is you've got, again, sort of 3 independent events that might happen that are routine. A port-in is taking a little bit longer, but it's not long enough to cause a problem. But then in quick succession, their bill gets run on an incorrect assumption, right? And so typically these are lagging indicators in the sense that it'll show up in a KPI report or an SLA report 15 days later, 30 days later. The fundamental shift is you can almost pair like an agent to a customer, right? And it can be like watching and saying, oh, this particular customer is having this problem. I can in real time, I don't have to wait a month, but I can in real time address this, right? We can send them a promotional code. We can send them a text saying, oh, I'm sorry, this took too long, right? And I think that's the key, right? Is that it's a fundamentally different way of operating. It's not just, now we have 1 million agents, right?
Right. Let's add another layer in just as we move on a little bit. I think we've kind of touched on the fact that sovereignty and regulation and security and personal information security, particularly in this agentic AI, where it's being agentic universe, where we're moving things on all the time, which without that audit trail being as defined perhaps as it has in the past, or maybe you'll tell me it is, forgive me. But maybe if you could talk, because I know that Deutsche Telekom has particularly been a big advocate of understanding about sovereignty and regulation from a concerning from your customer's point of view. Where does that play in how you put your strategy together? Because I think we're in a very regulated part of the world in Europe, whereas I think in North America it's a little less regulated, but nonetheless important.
Yeah, it's even worse because, regulation is different in every country in Europe. That's one of the big impediments of our industry. And we see that in the reality of our data implementation because what we see, for example, is that countries differ if it comes to data residency rules. So, for example, in Poland, some data has to reside in country. There is no region of the hyperscalers in Poland. So what do, right? You need an on-prem instance, and otherwise you can't act that way. What we can work on is make sure that using the platform consistently, whether you work within a public cloud, in a sovereign cloud that is provided by the hyperscalers, or in an on-prem instance, feels the same, and the data can share all the required parts that you also mentioned that are not so much about the lake. Ingest the data just once, have a marketplace, have a catalog just once. So these kind of things are really important to deal with those peculiarities that we unfortunately have.
And in an agentic AI, Suleiman, environment where it's machine to machine, how are you approaching that? Where are you approaching that audit trail, that security trail? Is it something that you're concerned about in the architecture of it, or is it more broad in the organization?
Over the last year, security has become a part of the basic thinking. So, a couple of years ago, maybe a decade ago, it would be, a security officer who would audit what you are doing and then come back with recommendations. Now, it's a basic requirement for everyone. So you'll have internal trainings which make sure, how you're dealing with it. So that's a part of the basic thinking now. So if, in Europe specifically, once the GDPR came in, so that changed a lot of process. Before it was, internal company policy, now it's a legal requirement. So that was what changed the thinking. And then in UK, we got the TSA as well.
Yes.
So that's also defining what can be done, how it should be done. And that is important because, customers trust us. At my home, my checkbook is somewhere stacked in the cupboard. My important things are also somewhere locked. But here I have my bank, my access, everything on my phone. And especially going over the air.
Yes.
And people trust us with that. And that has been made possible only because over decades, that has been done in a secure way. And people trust us. So therefore, security is really key for us. And, it's part of the basic infra that, you have to have a secure system, whatever that is.
Thank you very much, Suleiman. Hisham, is it the same in Canada? Is it something that you're tracking in Canada very closely? Don't get me wrong. I'm assuming you are. I'm trying to.
I mean, even if we are not as regulated, we know it's coming, right?
Yeah.
So how do you prepare?
Yeah.
But maybe just because I know we're going to run out of time, a quick thing. So for us, it's about having tight controls everywhere and that observability and audit trail. So when it comes to models, whether predictive models or large language models or small language models, you have to have a model lifecycle. So they are registered, they're in a marketplace. There's controls around the model drift, the answer quality, and you monitor that over time. And you also categorize which models can do what kind of tasks. So that's at the model level. Then when we talk about the agentic, we're almost back to where we were a decade ago with APIs. When it was the Wild West, and then we always realized we need API gateways to govern this. And how do you have access controls and visibility? So it's the same thing now. We're having all our agents and MCPs, and we're having gateways that manage this. And nothing can go through unless it's going through a gateway. But then a gateway goes through an approval process saying, am I allowing this communication between these two agents or an agent and MCP? And is that sanctioned? And if it is, what are the rules that govern it? Can it be production, not production? What are locality? And so there's these controls now that we're building around to give us that visibility and then the audit trail and the governance around all these elements.
Thank you, Hisham. Very last word to you, if I may, Kyle.
Well, on the governance thing, a provocative statement I've been thinking about is, as we keep assigning more and more responsibilities to these agents or these teams of agents, is when are they actually going to show up on an org chart, right?
Yes.
Along with, you know, it's not just a tool anymore. It's an actual business function that is fully operating. I don't know if they have an agent org chart and a human org chart, or it's one, but governance is obviously the most critical aspect.
Most critical.
Probably.
That's a perfect way to finish. Thank you very much. Will you please thank my panel, Kyle, Hisham, Suleiman, and of course Thomas. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, John.
Go this way, gentlemen.